You opened the calculator again last night. You already knew what it would say. You've run it enough times to know. But something in you needed to see the number again anyway. Needed to watch it sit there the way it always sits there. Real and built and exactly what you planned. And still, the certainty didn't come. Not the way you thought it would. When you finally got here. Not the way the number was supposed to feel when it arrived. You've been waiting for that feeling for 20 years. And the closer you get to actually living on this money, actually stopping, actually watching everything you've built become the only thing standing between you and going back, the more you suspect the feeling isn't coming. Not because the number is wrong, because the number was never the whole answer. Here is the thing no one tells you while you're building. Saving money and living on money are two completely different skills. You spent 20 years developing the first one. You got good at it. Disciplined, consistent. You made the contributions when it would have been easier not to. You stayed in when everything said get out. You built something real from nothing more than the decision to keep going, when the version of life that cost more was right there and available. That skill produced the number. But the number sitting in an account and the number producing income you can actually live on, month after month, for 30 or 40 years, through everything the market and your health and the cost of being alive will throw at it. Those are not the same thing. And the gap between them is not small. It's the gap between a finish line and a starting point. You crossed one, you're standing at the other. And the work that comes next is different from any work you've done before. At some point, the number has to stop being a symbol and become a calculation. Not the calculation that produces the feeling of security, but the one that answers a specific question you've been circling without fully landing on. What does this actually pay me? Monthly. In real life, starting the first month, the paychecks stop. The guideline most people know is the 4% rule. Withdraw 4% per year, and historically the portfolio survives a 30-year retirement. That's the version of this that gets repeated in articles and calculators and conversations with people who mean well. At $500,000, 4% is $20,000 per year. Before taxes, before healthcare, before the inflation that will make everything you buy in year 15 cost meaningfully more than it costs today. $20,000 per year is $1,667 a month. Sit with that number for a moment, not as a projection, as a Tuesday, as a specific month in year 4 of retirement when the account statement arrives, and that's what came out, and that's what's left, and that's what next month looks like too. That number lands differently than $500,000 did. And this is the first place where the gap becomes visible between the number you built toward and what that number actually produces when you ask it to replace a paycheck. For some people, $1,667 a month is workable. With the right structure around it, with other income supplementing it, with housing costs already cleared, it's a foundation that holds. For others, it's the moment the certainty stops coming. Not because they failed, and because nobody showed them this number while they were still in a position to build around it. There is something about the first 5 years of retirement that changes everything after them, not metaphorically. Mathematically. Picture two people, same $500,000, same withdrawal rate, same average annual return over 30 years. The only difference is the order the returns arrive in. The first person gets strong returns early and weaker returns later. The second gets weak returns early and stronger returns later. Same number, same average, same everything except sequence. The first person retires comfortably. The second person may run out of money. Here is why. When the market drops in the early years of retirement and you're withdrawing from the portfolio at the same time, you're selling shares at reduced prices to fund the month. That permanently reduces the number of shares working for you when the recovery comes. The recovery happens. but you own less of it than you would have if the timing had been different. At a larger portfolio, there's enough buffer that this risk is manageable. At $500,000, the buffer is thinner, which means the withdrawal rate you choose in year one, the number you put into the calculator the first month the paychecks stop, isn't just a math decision. It's a structural decision that carries weight for the next 3 decades. A 4% withdrawal in a declining market in year one creates pressure that compounds in ways that are very difficult to recover from. A 2.5 to 3% withdrawal, kept conservative because other income is carrying part of the load, keeps the portfolio intact long enough to absorb whatever the market does early on. This is why the structure surrounding the number matters as much as the number itself, and why the most important question isn't whether you have $500,000, and it's what $500,000 is sitting inside of. There is one variable that changes the entire picture before anything else does. Not the market, not the withdrawal rate, not the income stream. Housing. The difference between retiring with no housing payment and retiring while carrying a mortgage or rent isn't a lifestyle difference. It's a structural difference that shows up in the math before anything else gets a chance to. A $1,500 monthly housing cost requires $18,000 more per year from the portfolio than no housing payment at all. At $500,000, that's a 3.6% difference in withdrawal rate before you've accounted for a single other variable. That is the difference between a withdrawal strategy the models support and one that introduces real pressure in year 5, which means the question of where you live and whether you own it free and clear isn't a comfort question. It's the first structural question, the one everything else gets built on top of. Get that one right, and the rest of the math becomes a different conversation. Here is where the math changes most significantly. If the portfolio has to carry your entire monthly expense on its own, no other income, just withdrawals, then the withdrawal rate is determined entirely by what you spend. At $3,500 per month, that's $42,000 per year. An 8.4% withdrawal rate. No historical model supports that long term. At $2,500 per month, that's $30,000 per year. A 6% withdrawal rate. Still aggressive across a 35-year horizon. But add a modest income stream, $1,000 per month from consulting work you actually want to do, from a skill that produces income without consuming your life, from anything that runs alongside retirement rather than replacing it. And the portfolio only needs to cover $1,500 per month, $18,000 per year, a 3.6% withdrawal rate. Add paid-off housing and monthly expenses drop further. And now the portfolio covers $1,000 per month, $12,000 per year, a 2.4% withdrawal rate that historical data supports across nearly every market scenario ever modeled. Same $500,000. Completely different risk profile. This is the structure that makes $500,000 perform the way a larger number might perform without it. Not more money. A different architecture around the money that's already there. The people who retire successfully at this portfolio size aren't the ones who had more, and they're the ones who spent time building the structure before they needed it, while the options still look the way they look now, rather than the way they look after you've already stopped. There are 2 variables that belong in your expense model that most retirement calculators either undercount or ignore entirely. The first is health care. If you retire before 65, you carry the full cost of health coverage before Medicare. For one person in reasonable health, that might be $500 to $1,000 per month in premiums before anything is actually used. For 2 people, it can reach $2,000 or more depending on age and health. That is not a footnote. That is a line item that belongs in the first row of the expense model, the one you build the whole structure around, not the asterisk you account for later. A decade of healthcare costs before Medicare is a significant portion of a $500,000 portfolio. It needs to be visible before retirement begins, not after. The second is time. If you retire at 52 and live to 90, that portfolio needs to last 38 years. Most historical models supporting the 4% rule assumed a 30-year horizon. The math doesn't collapse across every scenario, but it shifts enough that the assumptions most people are using are built for a retirement shorter than the one they're likely to have. These aren't worst-case variables. They're the ordinary mechanics of a retirement that lasts as long as retirements last now. They belong in the model before the decision is made. There is one more variable that doesn't appear in any financial model. Some people build a structure that works. The numbers are right. The withdrawal rate is conservative. The income supplements the portfolio the way it's supposed to. Everything on the spreadsheet holds. And something else doesn't. The identity that came with work. The daily purpose that was so embedded in the routine that its absence leaves a shape you didn't know was there until it was gone. The social infrastructure of a career that was carrying part of the weight in ways you didn't notice until you weren't in it anymore. This leads a meaningful number of early retirees back to some form of work within 2 years. Not because the money ran out, because the retirement they built was financially complete and personally incomplete. That's not failure. It's information. And it matters for planning, because if there's a real chance you'll want to work in some capacity anyway. If the version of retirement that actually fits your life involves staying engaged with something that produces both income and purpose, then the structure built around modest ongoing income isn't a compromise. It's the accurate model, the one that matches the retirement you'll actually live, rather than the one that looks right on paper. There is a version of this that works, not theoretically, in practice, lived by people who didn't have more than you have and didn't need more than you have. No housing payment. Monthly expenses built honestly, including healthcare in the first row, not the footnotes. A modest income stream keeping portfolio withdrawals at or below 3%. A willingness in the first 5 years to adjust rather than hold a fixed withdrawal, regardless of what the market does. And that configuration allows $500,000 to do what a larger number would do without the discipline around it. But it requires building the structure before retirement begins. Not while you're in it, not after the first year reveals the gaps. Before. Because the options available before look different from the options available after. The decisions that feel like planning now feel like damage control later. And the difference between those two positions isn't the number, and it's the timing of when you looked at it clearly. You've been waiting for the certainty to come with the number. It hasn't, and it won't. Not because the number isn't real, it is, and it took something to build it, but because certainty was never something a number could produce. It's something a structure produces. The number is what you spent 20 years building. The structure is what you build now. And the difference between the people who retire at $500,000 and feel what they thought they'd feel, and the ones who get there and find the calculator still open at night, isn't the number. It's whether they built the second thing before they needed it. You still have time to be the first AMC's kind? That's not reassurance. That's just where you're standing right now.